Now we're going to move on to our second video in flipping our classroom. It's going to be called Unit 3C because we did the one unit in class, and we're going to be comparing and ordering integers. All right, so remember, our learning objectives, what we hope to be able to accomplish by the end of this video, possibly, or just after we practice this a little bit, is we want to be able to determine if a number is greater than or less than another given number. So if I give you two numbers, say -8 and -4, which one is greater and which one is less? And then the last thing that we're going to be able to know how to do is to list them in order from greatest to least or from least to greatest. All right. It doesn't really matter which way it is, but we just have to be able to list numbers in order, is what it is that we have to be able to do as well. All right, and just to go over and refresh our memory a little bit for this, if we have a horizontal number line, remember, as we move to our right, we are increasing in value. And as we move to our left, we are decreasing in value. And we can use this to help us to determine if numbers are greater than or less than from each other. And same thing for vertical lines. As we move up, we are increasing in value. And as we move down, we are decreasing in value. So some of you may just be able to look at that -8 and -4 and say, well, I know that -4 is greater than. And some of you might not. So if you're not sure, one of the ways that we're going to do this in the beginning at least is to create these number lines to help us determine which numbers are greater than or less than. All right. And then once we do this a bunch of times and you get more comfortable with it, then you'll be able to start looking at these numbers and know right away which ones are which. All right, so now if we're going to start comparing numbers, there's going to be these symbols that we're going to start seeing, and these symbols are inequality symbols, right? And the two symbols that we will see are going to be less than or greater than. So let's just make sure you guys understand how to read these. We read these from left to right. So when I see this symbol here, the way that I am reading this is I'm saying the number to the left-hand side is what to the number to the right-hand side. And remember, if it opens up, you guys talked about an alligator wanting to eat. So the opening side is saying the side that is greater than. So since we're reading this from left to right, this one is read as less than. All right. And then for the next symbol that we have, same thing. We read this from left to right. So the side that it's opening up is our greater side. So that means this number over here is greater. So we would say that this is greater than. All right. You do need to know these two symbols and how to read them and write them. All right. So if we're saying compare these two, we're going to eventually write an inequality symbol to compare them. And when you look at this, maybe you know, obviously, that hopefully 2 is greater than -6 because it's a positive and a negative. And positives are always going to be more. But maybe you want to just make sure that you're getting this right. So in this case, we can plot the 2 points on our number line, -6 and 2, and we can say, okay, which number is to the right? And since 2 is to the right of -6, that means that it is greater than. So you can write it as 2 is greater than -6, or you can write it as -6 is less than 2. They both say the exact same statement, and it doesn't really matter which way you choose. All right, so then for the next one, compare -5 and -3. Well, they're both negative numbers, so maybe they don't jump out at you right away. But when we put our points on -5 and -3, we see that -3 is to the right of -5. So that means that it has to be greater than. So we can then say that -5 is less than -3. It's one way that we can write it. Or we can flip it around and we can write -3 is greater than -5. It doesn't really matter which way you write this, as long as if your inequality is opening up to -3 in both of these examples, because we're saying it's greater than. All right, so if you could do this without a number line, you don't have to show me that. But if you need it, we can always plot the points and say, well, which one's to the right? All right, so for this one here, we are going to go ahead. I'm going to use 3 different colors. So I'm going to use green for 1, I'll use red for 2, and I'll use blue for 3. So that this way you can see where the points are. So it's comparing 0 and -4. Like I said, hopefully these ones should jump out at you right away because 0 is greater than any negative number that we have. But once again, we can plot the points at 0 and -4. And we see that 0 is to the right of -4. So I can then say that 0 is greater than -4. Same thing with these two. Hopefully you guys are able to just plot these points. I'm going to just continue this number line out. I guess when I made this, I didn't really take into consideration all the numbers. So in this case here, when I go to plot these, I have -5 and I have +5. -5 is to the left or of +5, so that means that the +5 has to be greater. And once again, right away, you should know that +5 is greater than -5 because it's a positive number versus a negative number. This one, maybe you're not sure because they're both negative. Let me extend this number line a little bit, and let me write my -8. All right, and then from here, I'll plot my points. I have -8 and I have -7. Well, -7 is to the right of -8, so that means it has to be greater than. All right, when we're dealing with positive numbers, the larger number is the greater number. Like 20 is larger than 10, that's our greater number. But when we deal with negatives, it's actually the reversal, that when we say -10 and -20, the number that we would actually think is smaller is the one that's greater. So -10 would be greater than -20 because it'll be closer to the number line. All right, so as we move in this direction, that 20 would take longer to get to, which is why that 20 is greater, because it's further to the right. But as we move in this direction, that 20 would take longer to get to, and it means it's further to the left. So that means it's going to be less than that -10. All right, but you can always just plot them on a number line to try and help you out if you're not sure. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this just do this kind of quickly. So I'll do 4 is going to be on this one here. It says list them from least to greatest. So we have to rewrite these numbers going from the least to the greatest. So I'm just going to plot them all. So I have -2, I have -3, I have 3, I have 1, and I have -1. So in order to list these from least to greatest, I'm just going to start with my furthest left number, -3, and I'm just going to write all of them as I move to my right. So -3, -2, -1, 1, and 3. All right, so for number 5, for this one, if you see from -8 to 6, that was a fairly large distance in my numbers. So that's why I count it by twos. So when I plot this -7, this first one, I'm sorry. So when I plot 4, that's going to be nice and easy right here. When I plot this -7, I am going to just put it right in the middle because -7 is directly in between 8 and 6. So I'm going to just plot it there. I'll plot this -8. Let's see, we have +6. And then we have 1, which is right in between 0 and 2. You can put tick marks in between those tick marks, so that way you have the more accurate representation, or you can just put them right in the middle, right? And then once again, we're going to move from left to right. So it'll be -8, -7, 1, 4, and 6. All right, and normally at the end of videos, you guys will be asked to do a question on your own that you'll answer, and it'll give me some feedback on Edpuzzle. And this will be one of those questions. So I'm not going to go through this in the video. You guys are going to do this right now, and then we'll see what the answer is. All right, so that's it for this video.